Democratic lawmakers say there is no evidence, none at all, to back up President Trump's claim that the FBI had spies embedded in his 2016 campaign. Here's California Democrat Adam Schiff right after he was briefed by the Justice Department. Watch.
Nothing we heard today has changed our view that there is no evidence to support any allegation that the FBI or any intelligence agency placed a spy in the Trump campaign or otherwise failed to follow appropriate procedures and protocols.
And my next guest agrees with that. He says the president is pushing the whole Spygate narrative just in order to take attention away from the Mueller investigation. Joining me right now is California Congressman John Garamendi. Congressman, good to see you. Do I have your thesis right?
Good afternoon. Well, this has really, I think, really gone off in a direction that is really not where it is. There was a counterintelligence operation underway amongst our intelligence agency as a result of what they had discovered Russia was doing to the Democratic National Committee, hacking into the computers, also into John Podesta. There was information that an Australian diplomat had given to the FBI that an individual in the Trump campaign was aware of all of these things, and WikiLeaks was leaking all of the, I'm sorry, not WikiLeaks. Yeah, WikiLeaks was leaking all of the emails out. All of this was going on. And so at that point, what did the FBI do? They sent somebody over to the Trump campaign to try to find out what was happening there. So it's a counterintelligence operation, a very serious effort by Russia to interfere in the American election, not just with the campaigns.
So you agree that the FBI did actually send an informant into the 2016 Trump campaign?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about that. That is correct. Was it inappropriate? Was it a spy? No, it was an individual who was to talk to a couple of folks to figure out what was going on. I don't have the inside information. So these are semantics,
whether it's spy, whether it's informant. That's what you're debating right now. You're saying it's not a spy, an informant.
No,
I mean, I would kind of think a spy and an informant are sort of the same thing if they've been sent there by the FBI.
Well, the FBI was very concerned about what Russia was doing in the 2016 election. There was a lot of evidence that Russia was seriously involved, certainly hacking into the DNC, John Podesta.
Yeah, you know, I would just remind you, Congressman, don't forget that the RNC had a number of threats against their system being attacked and being hacked. And, well, it turns out they took those threats seriously and they upgraded their security. The DNC did no such thing.
Well, whether they did or not, that's not the point. The point was that Russia was actively engaged in trying to interfere in the election. The rest of the story wasn't just that at that point. They were also interfering in the way in which votes would be counted across the numerous states.
Okay, so you think that somehow they broke into the Diebold voting machines and hacked the election, and what do you know, Donald Trump's president? No,
I didn't say that. Calm down. I didn't say that at all. I say it's true that they attempted to do so. All of the states said that they were able to protect the security of the vote, but Russia was doing all of those things at that time. Now, it would be perfectly obvious that the effect of what the intervention into the Trump campaign happened, absolutely no one knew about it. The FBI kept it absolutely undercover, under wraps, not one word during the entire campaign about any of the effort by the Russians to engage the Trump campaign. That all came up after the election.
I'm going to back up for a second. So,
sure.
Look, I think it's not disputable at all that the Russians tinkered with things in a way that we can't allow to happen again.
That's correct.
That said, I don't think it was exclusive to one side. I think they were out there working both sides of this, sir. They absolutely were, because you know what? They've gotten exactly what they wanted. They've gotten the discourse. They've gotten the chaos. They've gotten the hostility from both sides. So they were productive, shall we say, in terms of splintering the country, both sides, whether they were, helping Hillary, whether they were helping Bernie, whether they were hurting or helping Trump. It was all perhaps designed for the same exact reason. But, I look at it.
I agree with you.
Okay. But I look at it, if I'm the president of the United States now, And I'm looking at everything
Yes.
that has now thus happened, and we learn about this dossier that is straight out of the likes of some kind of tabloid. And I say to myself, James Comey, really running the FBI, doesn't think that it's important enough to him or to the FBI or to the president to know who funded that thing? Because that seems to be kind of critical, right? Like, I keep saying this over and over again. I'm like a broken record, but I don't think you've heard me say it, so I'll tell you, sir. As a journalist, right, I need to understand my sources. I need to understand what their motivation is. Shouldn't Comey have understood the motivation of who was funding that dossier?
Well, perhaps so. I couldn't speak to that one way or the other, but what we do know is that James Comey seriously injured the Hillary Clinton campaign with the twice. Once opening the investigation as to her emails during the course of the campaign, and then secondly, just before the election, just days before the election, doing it once again, both of which were extraordinarily damaging to the Hillary Clinton campaign. Simultaneously, there was an investigation underway as to what was happening within the Trump campaign. Not one word leaked out about that. So it's very, very difficult to say that Comey was somehow harming the Trump campaign when he was, in fact, obviously, in so public a way, seriously damaging the Clinton campaign.
What I would say, though, I mean, I think maybe you and I agree on this, Congressman. Comey wasn't very good at his job.
Well, let's just say he certainly harmed the Clinton campaign in the process. As to what effect all of this will have on the presidency remains to be seen, and that's what Mueller investigation is all about. It should run its course, and whatever comes of it will come of it. But what
we got a lot of
also needs
questions,
to be
and I think
done-
Americans deserve a lot of answers on that. We can
Absolutely
agree.
true.
Forgive me, I gotta leave it there. But it's good to see you, Congressman Garamendi.
Always a pleasure. Look
Appreciate
forward
hearing
to it.
from you.